Hello fun people, I'm Isaac Carlson, and today I want to figure out why throughout Shrek's first adventures, we never saw any other ogres until Shrek Forever After. Where were Brogan, Cookie, Gretch, and the rest of the ogres who participated in Fiona's resistance in the real timeline? Especially since we find out that Shrek's family became friends with all of them after the debacle with Rumpelstiltskin. While it was incredible to see Shrek discover a community of ogres in the alternate timeline, from my understanding, that's not actually how ogres traditionally lived across the land. There weren't villages of ogres that Shrek wasn't aware of or wasn't allowed to be a part of. I think that he was living like a typical ogre, and that in the real timeline, that's how all of the resistance fighters lived as well. I believe every ogre had their own swamp, and I think the key to understanding why Shrek and the rest of the ogres were so removed from one another begins to become clear by looking at the tragic traditions of ogres.
Who you trying to keep out? Just tell me that, Shrek. Who?
Everyone, okay?
Everyone Shrek was surrounded by in his early life was telling him that he was supposed to be a monster, and that led him to become isolated. According to the Shrek comics, Shrek's parents notoriously shamed any behavior by Shrek that would indicate that he was becoming anything other than a gruesome ogre. Out in the world, ogre parents pressured their kids to terrorize, scare, and horrify everyone around them. Ogre culture led to young ogres confirming the judgmental thoughts of hateful people and isolating them from people that may have been willing to help them. Remember, before Shrek became a well-known hero and the son-in-law to the king and queen of Far, Far Away, a very cushy gig, ogres were pretty much universally despised by the humans in the world. They were seen as big, stupid, ugly, and filthy creatures and were commonly mobbed on sight. There was no way for an ogre to not be familiar with men carrying torches and pitchforks whenever they were seen, which meant that when ogres were told to find somewhere to go by their parents, they would frighten people and subsequently be pushed away from the villages they entered. The unfair beliefs of people were further exacerbated because ogre parents supported their children to fall in line with the human stereotypes of ogres, all so that they could be seen as real ogres. And some ogre parents were so judgmental, demanding, and aggressive that they prioritized their own desires to the point where they even threatened to eat their own kids, which actually happened to Shrek.
He used to give me a bath in barbecue sauce and put me to bed with an apple in my mouth.
Ogres seem to have a long history of pushing away everyone they came across, and that is further solidified by how ogres are forced to leave home at a very young age. In fact, we learn from Shrek the Musical that at the age of 7, Shrek's ogre parents continued a centuries-long ritual of forcing Shrek to leave them so that he could find his own place to exist.
Go away!
All of this means that the unfortunate truth was that there was an understanding across the land that ogres were raised to follow traditions that supported terrorizing, threatening, and creating havoc wherever they went. And ogres knew all too well that was true whether they entered a village or were with their family. I honestly think it's possible Shrek and the others like him might not have even trusted other ogres after growing up with destructive parents. If that was their only exposure to other ogres, it makes sense why they wouldn't try to seek out others like themselves. I think for the majority of Shrek's life, he had to exist on his own and cope with the fact that he was physically and emotionally removed from everyone around him. And I don't believe this is a unique experience. From what we know about ogre traditions, I think for hundreds of years, ogres had to face the reality that they had no family to turn to as they faced humanity's clear hatred, distrust, and contempt for them. Ogres grew up in a culture where they were told to be scary, were forced to be independent, and often after dealing with horrible ogre parents, decided to forever remove themselves from the rest of the world. From Shrek Forever After, we learn that Shrek wasn't the last of his kind. They were all just doing what he had done when we first met him. I believe they were making earwax candles, creating powerful belches, enjoying mud baths, and having eyeball teenies far away from everyone else in their own protected bogs, which was why we never saw them until they were all being threatened. For centuries, it was easy to stay apart when their culture pushed them to do so, but when they began to be threatened as a species by the hands of Rumpelstiltskin, that was all wiped away because they had to come together if they hoped to remain free. With a common threat and a meaningful cause, I believe that was what finally was able to unify ogre kind. Building the rebellion was what showed the ogres that they were more alike than they ever could have realized. I believe that for hundreds of years, ogres were pushed apart because of their rituals, traditions, and culture, which led to ogres spreading out across the land in their own swamps. But once Shrek saw what ogres could accomplish together, I think that created the motivation in Shrek to seek out and unite his kind. Fun people, make sure to subscribe and click the beautiful bell if you're new, and then click on another magical video in the description or on the screen. Finally, as always, thank you to my patrons, thanks for watching, and have a magical day.